is going to be a casual chat for, potential triplets or even parents who have triplets who are going to college or starting a career for the first time.
Mhm.
And so what that really means is that they're separating for the first time. If, even if you're going to the same college, you're on your own for the first time. You're not living under the same roof, most likely,
Mhm.
unless something
Mhm.
else happened on
Yeah.
your journey.
Mhm.
And I wanted to bring you on because I remember you were with me when you dropped me off for college and we were a hot mess. I don't know why
I
Lee wasn't
remember.
there. Why wasn't Lee there? I think she was packing. She was packing for IU.
Yeah, I don't remember if we all started at the same time or not. Were you the
Like,
first to get dropped off, or
yes.
it was you? The first of everything?
Well, okay, so for context, we all started out going to 3 different colleges, and I went first for drop-off, and you drove with me
Mhm.
to North Carolina. And
I made that trip many times.
which thank you for doing.
You're welcome.
But let's talk about that feeling in the car.
Yeah, I think what it came down to was a lot of just unknown territory for the first time. So a lot of just like, what's your college experience going to be like? What's mine going to be like? And I think just a lot of probably overwhelm and at the same time sadness because our chapter of being under the same roof and together for the first 18 years of our life was ending. So it's just a lot of change, I think, happening at once. And when you're 18, I did not have as much self awareness as I have now. So it was just really like confusing and I think overwhelming was how I remember feeling.
Yes. And it's almost like we were so focused on packing and getting organized and finding a roommate and getting books or all of our stuff organized. When we were in the car, that feeling all of a
Yeah.
sudden rolling up, it like bubbled inside and we were like,
Yeah. I think the whole time we were like, this isn't happening. This isn't
denial,
happening.
denial.
Denial. And then like driving up, we're like, wait, you're getting out of the car and you're leaving?
What?
That's so
I have to leave?
sad.
Yeah, and I remember
Oh,
we just had these
yes.
huge
Okay.
sunglasses on.
I'm having memories of a picture of that of us in like our big
I
sunglasses.
can remember, and I'm sure dad had them on too, or whoever. We all just were wearing the sunglasses like, "Everything's fine."
And both mommy and dad were there, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh,
And so looking back and reflecting on that, I guess a piece of advice would be to maybe process some of those emotions before, don't you think?
yeah. I mean, I don't think you know how you're gonna feel until you're in it, but I think we all knew we were gonna feel like sad. And I feel that way about, yes, triplets and also just your high school friends. Like we were lucky enough to have had really close high school friend groups. So I think that there's a level of grief in it.
Yes. It's a good word.
You're grieving what was, and then at the same time optimistic about what's coming, but you don't obviously know what's coming. So,
The unknown, I
um, it was a lot of grieving is what I remember,
it's a great
and
word.
I think that's why it's a hard transition for a lot of people from high school to college, because you feel like you're having to leave behind, this whole life that you've built up until now. And then when you get to college, it's just newness and trying to fit in and find your place where you had a place for the last, X amount of years. And now, you're entering college where sure people are like, that's cool that you're a triplet, but they don't really know your triplets and your
Oh,
siblings. And it's just like trying to kind of reinvent
you're
yourself.
you're being seen as an individual person for the first time. You could tell no one you were a triplet, whereas, before that, was your identity. And
Mhm.
I think that feeling of grief and feeling like you belong somewhere so deeply is compounded by literally having to find a new place you belong.
Mhm. Yeah.
Oh gosh. I'm proud
Yeah.
of us. Also,
Me too.
I wanna say it's a privilege that we were that close. I know there has to be some triplets out
Mhm.
there who are listening to this being like, "I can't wait to get away from my siblings."
Well, there was a level of not the level of wanting independence,
Yes.
not necessarily from each other, but
Yeah.
I remember all being very ready to go
Yeah.
to college. But
Yeah. Good too.
now that I reflect back on it, I'm like, "Oh my god, I genuinely loved high school." I think it's because of the close-knit, like, secure relationships that we had.
Yeah.
Um, but at the time, we were like, "All right, ready to not ready to not have rules, ready to make our
Yeah.
own decisions."
Yeah, 100%. And so you mentioned something like, when you introduced yourself for the first time when you were at Kentucky,
Mhm.
but how did people react when you told them you were a triplet at first? Do you remember?
I remember just a lot of people being like, "What? I've never met a triplet," or "What was that like? Do you love being a triplet?" Things like that. So, I
Mhm.
mean, I feel lucky that I was able to say yes and that I felt very close to you guys. Um, and a lot of it was just like, "Are you guys similar? Are you different? And do you look alike?"
Mhm, the standard questions.
The standard questions that you get. But yeah, I mean, at the same time, it's just your triplets aren't around you, so it's like you kind of get to build your own character.
Do you feel like you changed who you were at all because you wanted to start fresh with a new identity?
I don't think so. No, I think I've probably always remained pretty steady in that regard.
That's healthy.
Um, that's healthy.
That's healthy. Um,
Uh, I would say at least my characteristics were probably a little more those stayed steady.
okay,
Hopefully.
or did you feel like you were able to be like, I feel like I felt this a little more free. Like you weren't like if you wanted to like this is gonna sound so funny, but when I started like dating for the first time, I wasn't freaked out about like you guys and what you would think about that because you didn't know
Oh
anyone,
yeah, that's very true.
right?
Yeah, you weren't having to get like the opinions of
100%.
your sisters about everything. Although, let's be honest, we were probably texting,
Yep.
calling every single day about
Oh,
anything of note that
true.
happened.
Yeah, so you knew all the names I was telling you about even though you weren't there.
Oh, I knew all the names. Yeah, and we wanted to. We
Yeah,
wanted to know all of the
yeah.
details.
Which is a good thing for people who are freaking out that they're leaving, like, thank God that's when, social media and FaceTime can work to your advantage. It's like we had that. Call in between walking to classes, whatever you have to do, schedule a weekly FaceTime.
Yeah, I kind of wish like social media wouldn't have been around because it was so
Mhm.
easy to compare, like,
Mhm.
are you at a fun party and I'm not at a fun party?
Mm.
Or, are you making friends,
Ugh,
more easily or not as easily? Or, it's just the whole comparison train that I think Instagram did not help with.
well, and it's easy to compare among triplets in general, and then Instagram has
Mhm.
just done that. I mean, it also is a connective device, but yes, it definitely can breed comparison too.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially as everyone is entering this new chapter, you're just like, is my chapter as good as their chapter?
Mhm.
Um, or as fun? Did I make the right decision? All of that. So I think that
Mhm.
definitely didn't help during my freshman year at a college that only like one or two other people from my high school went to.
When did you
Um,
know that you wanted to transfer?
well, so I always heard, give it a full year.
Mhm.
So I knew I wanted to do that. So how I was feeling like first semester wasn't probably going to be a great depiction of if I should make a decision about transferring then. So I knew I wanted to give it a full year.
Mhm.
But I wanna say probably, like, halfway through 2nd semester, I, like, committed to transferring, and, um, I mean, to be frank, in the college search process, as I feel like sometimes when I was younger, I just made decisions on a whim
Mm,
without doing, like, all of the research and processing that I do now.
mm.
But I literally visited Kentucky once. I knew it was gonna be a school that not everyone was gonna be going to. I knew I wanted to get into nursing, and I had a fun time. So, I was like, "This sounds great."
Yeah.
And that's how I made my decision, and I knew it was close enough to be able to drive back
Mhm.
home. And so, that's how I made my decision. I think now that I reflect back on that, I probably would have been a little bit more, selective in my process of how I wanna choose, like, a college, but when you're younger, those are the things that you care about, like, am I gonna like the degree that I'm gonna get, and am I gonna have a
Yeah.
fun time?
I remember there was
Uh,
a great nursing school, and another thing, like, when you were thinking about that, were you like, "Oh, well, Paige and Lee aren't going there?"
no, I don't think
Really?
that was a decision that I think I made that decision in, like, wanting to try something new.
Yeah.
And so that's how I came to that point, and they did have a great nursing program, which at the time was, like, my priority. And so, yeah, I mean, it got to a point where I could tell that, I could kinda see how my future would pan out there, which probably still would have been great, but, at the same time, I was having a lot of just, like, FOMO from friends at IU, and knowing I could still make new friends going there, but have that, like, sense of security with, some of my closer high school friends, and then Lee was there, obviously,
Was that intriguing
and
that
so
Lee was there?
oh, yeah,
Or other trip
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely, and I will say, like, once I transferred, like, Lee and I ended up going into the same degree,
Mhm.
and we spent probably every single day together, which I loved.
Yeah.
Um, we loved that. And so I think having her close too was, like, reaffirming.
But this is why I wanted to talk to you because you went through the process of all of us separating, and you also experienced what it was like to have a college experience at the same place as one of your triplets. So,
Mhm.
I asked Lee this when she was on too. How did you balance that? Like, how did you balance having your own, identity while also being with her every day? Just one
Yeah.
simple question.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting because, Lee would make so she was in a different sorority, so she would have friends that were getting to know her for just Lee in college,
Mhm.
and the same for my friends were just getting to know me. So it was interesting to, like, hear their perspective or, how they view Lee
Mhm.
in college. So I thought it was really fun. And it's not like we did every single thing together, but it was more so in class, like we had just the chance to, like, catch up and um just, like, check in on how each other was doing. But I
I
think we still were able to have, like, separate experiences when we were there together.
because of built-in things that you were already doing.
Mhm.
I asked Lee this too, and she answered on the opposite side of it. So, she talked about being in the same class as you, where
Mhm.
she wasn't scoring as high as you were on tests.
Mhm.
How did that
Yeah.
feel? Was that hard for you that you were just inherently a better test taker and watching your triplet, even though she was so smart and talented, like, not score as high? How did that feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was maybe awkward in some in some ways, or
Yeah,
I, wanted to try to help her as best I could with,
felt like you
you
needed to
know
help her.
definitely. Yeah. Or just, like, I have a certain way that I like to study and take tests, so I would try to, like, share that with her, but, I mean, at the time, like, that wasn't, I feel like, Lee's number one priority either. It wasn't probably like, you know, my way of studying. We were different in that way. So I think she shined a lot more in her like social skills and people skills and things like that that I wasn't as good at. So I
What do you
think it
mean?
was like Lee's priority was, making friends and getting to
Mm,
know new people and things like that. Where for me, I think school was like the top priority for me. And the balance of that obviously are pros and cons of each. Like obviously Lee gave it her all with studying and things like that. You have to in dietetics, but I probably like leaned into it more heavily.
yeah,
Um, but what it came down to is, test taking and in college, like that's just how it works. You study and you take tests and um that's how it's determined if you're good or not at a certain field. And obviously that's not a good indication if you see where Lee is today. But it
yeah,
was something that I was good at. So I think I leaned into that a lot just to see like how far, it could take me. And I think Lee knew like what her strengths were and she leaned into that. And I think we benefited from each other's strengths. Like Lee had, a lot of new friends and things like that, which I did too, but I found myself hanging out with Lee and her friends a lot because of that. Whereas with my side of being, better at school, like I would kind of help her with that part. So I think we kind of balanced each other out.
it's a triplet pro right there, is using each other's strengths. Do you feel like
Yeah.
had to hold back or dim yourself a little bit for the sake of
Do
her
you
f
mean in school?
yeah.
Maybe a little bit, but I mean, I think the opportunities that I was given because of the grades and stuff that I got are like enough light,
Mhm.
opportunities to go to good schools or grad schools. Some of my opportunities for jobs on campus were great. So I feel like my grit in school was like acknowledged and not necessarily dimmed because of that. But obviously, I think what it came down to is I didn't want Lee to feel like she wasn't good because of her grades. So, of course, you want to like protect your sister from that. And it's not like her grades were even bad. It's
It's
just
crazy. They were
in
so
the
high.
dietetics field, it was like you have to literally have perfect grades.
Right.
So it was a lot of pressure.
Yeah, but that's what you're good at. So I just didn't know if you had to feel like you had to hold back in any way because of that. And because like you said, we were so protective of each other.
So protective. Yeah, you just don't I just didn't ever want her to feel like she wasn't good enough, but I think that was her own journey of finding that even though wasn't considered to be like excellent at text taking and stuff, like I
You're
found my
kidding.
way and I found my place, which was her journey to learn just as
Yes.
sisters were protective. We're like,
So
nothing bad can ever happen to
I
each
know.
other.
I know. And, and it's so funny, I'm, like, over here asking about your, like, really high grades, and I'm over here, like, the artist who really isn't good at taking tests.
Yeah, but obviously, like, there's downsides to having like really good grades. Like, sure, I was good at taking tests and stuff, but I had to put in a lot of work to do that. But I mean, keep in mind, I had my fun in college. I think I
Mhm.
did an okay job of balancing everything. But now that I look back at it, it's like, dang, that was a lot of work uh, to get to where I needed to go.
Mhm. And I think that's another, like, piece of advice I'd give to triplets is if you are at the same college, like, really trying not to compare or over, compensate for their feelings. It's a learn that balance as time goes on, but another triplet pro is the fact that we got to visit each other.
Oh, yeah, that was so fun.
Because we got to enter each other's worlds that felt so new and fun, like, "Oh my gosh, what are you doing over here that I don't know about?" We kn that was the first time we really, like, didn't know what we were doing outside of
No,
each other. So what was it like when you saw my life in North Carolina for the first time?
oh my gosh. It's just so different,
Yeah, a different
especially Elon. Yeah, it's just a different world. But I think just knowing that you were there because you were passionate about the program and everything that that had to offer, that I was really excited to see that world. And then obviously, like, the people that went there, um, are from all over, and so I think that was really fun, like, getting to know your friends there and, what brought them to Elon, and
Mhm.
just their whole life stories were
Yeah.
just interesting.
Yeah, it was the first time
Um,
I really got to, like, meet, a whole new diverse group of people from different backgrounds, whereas sometimes if
yeah.
you stay in state, it's more of the same people, which can be amazing, but also, maybe a challenge to you guys to be like, "Oh, wow, there's, like, a ton of other people in the world," which is what college is for, right?
Yeah, which honestly, I feel like I met people from all over as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
It's a huge school.
yeah.
So I would encourage people to just get to know as many different people as you can. I mean, it's funny. I feel like all the Midwest people though just know Midwest person. That's kind of who they gravitate to because just of their
Comfort.
personality and their values, whereas I feel like we'd also meet some people that just operate differently because of where they grew up, and you got to
Mhm,
learn, a whole different
mhm.
persona, but
I would
regardless, I
say,
think it was fun.
looking back, I wish I did that even more because other people are gonna challenge you and help you actually, find who you really are even deeper. And so
Mhm.
I would say, as comfortable as that may feel, like, find people who are different than you.
Yeah, exactly. And
Mhm.
then you'll also always I think it's important to find your, like, secure crew as well. Like,
Yes.
who can you lean on when things get hard? And
Mhm.
then who can you meet that's gonna, like, really diversify your world a little bit? Because you're gonna need people, and I think when you go to college who you can call and talk to if you need it, because it can be hard.
Yeah.
Uh, it's a transition period for sure.
Yeah, like, you go from talking about things with your triplets if that's if you're in a bond with your triplets that feels secure, you go from talking about things in your life with them to having to find other people to talk about things in your life in college,
Yeah, but
you
I
know?
also think it's okay to recognize that your triplets or your other siblings are your, like, secure people too that you can lean on, and just,
Yeah.
like, let them know before they go to college, "Hey, like, if you ever need anything, like, call me,
Yes.
lean on me," which I feel like we did that for each other a lot.
Yeah. And, sometimes you don't wanna give that burden to your triplet that you're struggling, or if you see that they're thriving and you're not. Like, looking back, I feel like there was probably times that I went through that, and don't be afraid to share that because, like, again, these 3 paths are not linear. They're not gonna look the same
Yeah.
for everyone for the trip
Yeah, I feel like anytime one of us was struggling, we were all there, like, the next day. It's like, "We'll be there,"
or at least on the call, yeah.
or on the call. Yeah,
It's
but
a balance though,
sometimes
because
I
you can
remember, like, physically being there for each other.
yeah, but also
Um,
we can't save each other, which is a hard pill to swallow. I think at first we were like, we want to save each other because we're talking from a place where we are and we're so close. And so I would say
yeah.
for people watching this, like, you cannot save your other triplet if they're going through something, or if they're on a lesson, if they're experiencing something that is going to be a lesson for them, you can't stop them from going down that.
Yeah. You can just be there to be with them, support
Oh,
them.
that's some deep. Okay.
We all had lessons, just
Oh,
being
as you should.
transparent.
I mean, and you should have lessons because that's what, a huge
Mhm.
part of college is growing. Let's do one last question. Two
Okay.
questions actually. One, how do you think triplets can stay connected if they're not at the same college or if they're starting like separate careers after high school and they're not going to college? And two,
Mhm.
what would you say to the parents whose triplets are leaving and they're going to be empty nesters and they're freaking out?
Oh my gosh. Um, I guess for the parents first,
Yeah.
it's funny, I feel like mom was like, "It actually was harder when you guys left the nest and went to college because as a parent, you just don't have as much visibility, I think, around everything that's going on in your kid's life."
It was your whole
So I
existence is making sure that we were operating.
operating, yeah. But
Yeah.
I think for parents, if you did everything you could to teach your kid about what's important in life and their values, then, that they're going to use those to guide their way. You kind of have to let go of the control of everything else.
Yeah.
Sure, there's going to be times when you need to intervene.
Mhm.
But I think just knowing like you've done everything you can and just trust that your kid's gonna make the right decision, hopefully. Which isn't always the easiest in college, and I made some bad decisions, but, um and it's like a new journey for the parents, like, being empty nesters, like, it's your time to figure out what makes you happy outside of your kids, um, new experiences, more time, with your partner, that you maybe didn't used to have, so I think it's an exciting time for parents as well.
Absolutely. Maybe go celebrate that you just did that for 18 years.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely, and
yeah,
it was fun though, like, I remember mom and dad coming to visit college,
it's really
and
fun.
that was really fun, and also I was an hour away from home, and there were many a times when I was like, "I need a break, I'm just gonna drive home
Mhm.
and have someone else take care of me for
That was hard for me
a
because I
few
was
days."
that was hard for me because I was a plane ride. I definitely felt really jealous of that, as excited I was to be away. I remember that being
Yeah,
fun. Okay,
yeah.
so that's a good segue. How can we stay connected? How can everyone stay connected outside of the obvious?
I think it's just like making it a priority. It's so easy to get lost, I think, in college and not make time for that.
Mhm.
But even thinking of it as simple as like, hey, I have 3 minutes before class starts or I'm walking, like call each other and just see how things are going.
Yeah.
Um, I think we would also do like a lot of like Snapchats just to keep up.
Low key, Snapchat is still how we talk a lot.
Yeah, just like even
Check-in of
just
what you're
seeing
doing.
what's going on. Yeah. So that was really helpful for us to stay connected. And then I think too, just like always trying to keep an event planned where we knew we were all going to be like getting together in person, whether it was, coming home for a birthday or going to the lake or
Holiday.
going to visit each other in college. Holidays were big. Yeah. And not only for your triplets, but just for your like friends.
Mhm.
I remember those were like huge highlights for
Yeah, getting to
our
reconnect.
friend group.
And we do this now with our friends group from high school too, is that we send photos to each other every Sunday of the week, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"That's a great idea for everyone." Just like, "Hey, this was my week." Takes 2 minutes, do it on Sunday, do the same thing with your parents, just show them you're alive.
Yeah.
It really does make a difference because you feel like you're not like, "Oh, wow, I haven't talked to them in months." You feel
Yeah.
like you're up to date with things. The thrill of when you get mail
Mhm.
college
Mhm.
was so fun.
Very true.
So that someone was thinking of you, like, the
Yeah, it's a good
technology is
idea.
great, but sometimes you maybe a little letter or, like,
Yeah.
or, like, a letter if your triplet has a, like, huge something coming up,
Mhm. It's a
you
good
could be like,
idea.
"You're gonna kill it," send him a little Starbucks card, I don't know.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah. Kristen, thank you. This was so helpful and fun, and a lot of these things we're talking about with growing pains, and I think it's gonna happen through every stage of our life.
Yes.
But this is just
100%.
specific to college. So
Yeah, it's one chapter in the book.
yes, and a lot of these themes will carry on for every chapter. We still are going through struggles, we're still meeting new people, we're still finding who we really are. Take all this, you know, wisdom and lessons and apply it to all of that as well, I think is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, I think just so long as you're taking every experience that you have and thinking of it as a lesson, you
Mhm.
can't go wrong. You just get wiser.